In 5 minutes time I'm going to be getting on with making the dragon to go with our dragon rider. See you then. Bye.
alive.
Oh, hello everyone. Welcome to my stream. I'm Carly from Carly's Creative Clay. It's nice to see you. I see Arty Hearty Life's here already. So hi to you. I hope you've had a good week. I have been recovering from a virus and been busy making up a new line for my shop, which is going to be make your own sets. So it will have the instructions and all the photos and all the bits to make your own different things. So I will be showing you this in the future. Sorry about that. My husband did not mute his phone. Right. Quickly moving on. I always show some things from my shop when I get started, and these are some lion couple statues that I've made. Made them for Hi Arty Hearty Life. I made them for Gay Pride, so they're same-sex couples. And they're £15 each. And at the back they got their tails twisted, so it's a real nice lion cuddle going on. Right, let's chuck these to one side and get on with what I'm getting on with. Whilst I'm doing this, I'm going to bring up an overlay of something I made about a week ago or so. I said my husband bought me some alcohol inks for Christmas, and I was going to have an experiment with them. Well, I made a couple of pendants for my sisters. As you can see, it makes quite a nice sort of patchy effect. The clay that I used was white, so all that colour, and including the gold, is coming from the alcohol inks. Obviously I also stuck a load of stones at the bottom and in the centre, but I'm pleased with it for a first attempt. I didn't get as many of the really good cells of colour that you can get when you're practiced with using alcohol inks, but I said I'd show you what I do when I have a play around, and this is it. So back to what we were up to. Thank you. Right, in previous weeks I have been going through taking a armature that looked like that.
They are lovely. The colours are gorgeous.
Thank you, Arty Hearty Life. I do have a love for alcohol inks, and I will show you some more as I practice more with them. So I took a wire armature that I made. All this is in previous videos on my YouTube, and we built up the clay, and we've eventually ended up with this lady. Her skin colour may look a little bit patchy at the moment because I covered over a few cracks with raw clay, and the raw clay is a lighter colour than the baked clay. Sometimes that happens with your polymer clay, people. So as you can see, she's mostly finished. All we need to do with her is hands. So what I plan to do with her is make a statue like the one I made here, which is my first dragon lady. We're gonna make a dragon like this, different wing pattern, different colour scheme. Sorry, I still got this cough, it's very annoying. So we're back dragon making again. Now, for her, instead of having that big crystal table, the one we're making is going to have this crystal ball. And I got them from a charity shop, so I have no idea where to get more of them. So if anyone knows where to get this sort of crystal ball in various sizes, let me know. I'm vastly interested. But it'll have to be made of glass or it's got the potential to melt in the oven. What I've done is, from my wonderful clay supplier, Tumdee Doll's House Miniatures, I got some of the Fimo effects that I don't normally get. And what I've got is this granite effect. If you can see, I think it's matte black glitter that's in it that keeps that sort of granite look to the clay even when you work with it. So with that, I'm going to make a pillar for the crystal ball to stand on. So I think today though, I'm going to get going on making the dragon. Once we got the dragon made, we can then make the pillar, position them all in place, and then I make her hands last. And the reason why I'm going to make her hands last is because these are not actually going to be where the hands are going. You'd think they would be on those wires, but no, they're going to be, at least one of them anyway, is going to be embedded into the dragon, and then I'm going to make the hand just slightly bend a little and come up above the wire. So that's my hope. So if you picture, she's there. I'm going to get a dragon going round the back like that and have its head there, so she's stroking the head of the dragon. Then this hand's going to be over the crystal ball and a stand which will be like that. So that sort of height. So up near where that hand is. And then we make the base. That's what I'm envisioning anyway. So, because I don't want to deafen you all with rustling, what I've done is I've taken a bit of tin foil about the size of this chopping board. So what are we looking at? Let's get my ruler, my grubby ruler. About, what are we? It was about there, 38 centimetres by, yeah, about 38 squared. So it's a bit of a larger bit of tin foil than you would think. And you start squishing it together. And once you get a ball, find an end and start bringing those sides round like this. And then a glass board really helps, because what you're able to do then is, if you can see on that diagonal bend for the tummy, I'm pushing on it and rolling, and that way you can get rid of some of those sharp edges. You can compress the foil so it's much more structurally sound, and you can start making it look uniform. And once I got it to the shape that I want and the size that I want, the last bit of rolling that I did was pushing down on either end to make it so that you've got the tummy bump like that and a flat back. Oh, this cough is annoying. I am on an inhaler at the moment for it, so it will go. It's just taking a while. Once I've got it how I want, and as you can see it's quite firm, I then covered it in masking tape. And I cover in masking tape because you don't want the any sharp points of foil poking through your clay. Sharp points on your masking tape, however, this sort of thing, I find never pokes through because it's not as rigid as a point of foil, because that's metal. The paper always flattens down. So it's a good step to do. But if you are covering your foil in masking tape and plan to leave it for a couple of days, I do suggest put a coat of PVA glue on it, purely because you'll find the stickiness that's on the masking tape isn't actually that good. And I have come back and found that it's all start to unravel and peel off. so the PVA glue just holds it all in place. But if you're going to use it straight away, like I am with this, you don't have to. And the reason why I put foil is because this is going to be a very chunky dragon, and I want a stable centre, which I wouldn't have if I was baking clay all the way through, because the clay only turns hard when it hits the 110. So if it doesn't hit 110 degrees, it doesn't go hard. So you end up with this hard shell, soft centre, which isn't that great. So the other thing I've done off camera is I keep a pile of all my scrap clay, and I do it because it's really good to use in the centre of things where it doesn't matter what clay colour you're using. So what I've done is conditioned up a whole heap of that, and it's come out as a kind of plum colour actually. You'll always find that your scrap, if you mix it up together enough, will either turn brown, greyish brown, or if you have a lot of pink or red in it, this sort of browny purple. It just seems to be the way of it. And what I'm going to do is make all the body parts in that, because as you can see on this dragon, once it's been made, we're going to cover it all in scowls, so you won't get to see any of the actual structural clay. So it's pointless using a colour that is one that you would actually want to use in other projects. So yeah, use this to get rid of your scraps. There are a million other things to do with scraps, by the way, but this is definitely a legitimate way of doing it. So I'm going to use a rolling pin just to get these a bit thinner, because we don't want to make that body too much bigger than what it already is. The good thing with a dragon is that the colour and design, there's a lot of choices you can go for with it, because the animal don't exist technically in nature at the moment. I know I'm going to be disappointing people there, but the reality is they don't. You can really have a lot of creative space with dragons. And also because the babies are meant to be quite small and the adults quite big, you've got a lot of size range that you can go for, and you're still actually not breaking the rules. So you can put this through a pasta machine, but I find that doing so means you've got to clean your pasta machine, and sometimes it's just good to use a rolling pin, it's quicker. But whilst I'm here, I will tell you this. I have a lot of people saying that they find their clay sticks to their acrylic rolling pin. You'll find after you use it, do a couple of rolls, if you look at it, I don't know if it shows on camera, but there is a slight sheen difference to the rolling pin. It doesn't really show, but the area that's actually touched the clay, it leaves a slight residue, and that is very, very slightly sticky. So if you're finding your clay sticking to your rolling pin, just wipe your rolling pin down and you'll find that you can then go again and it's fine. The other problem people find is they roll out and then their work stuck to the board and they don't want to tear it by lifting it, and that's definitely a problem when it's very thin. For that, make sure you got a rigid tissue blade and don't push away from you, it's unstable. You hold either side and you pull towards you. You want the blade bit touching your glass counter and you're literally just sliding along. A little wiggle can also help and it frees it up. Then blade away, facing away from you. So it's definitely doable to use rolling pins instead of pasta machines with your clay. Now this is about as thin as I like to go, so it's a couple of millimeters thick, I'd say. Once you start getting thinner than that, the clay, it doesn't hold its rigidity, is that a word? So it's much more easy to fold on itself, touch itself and get stuck, and then you're in a mess and having to re-roll it out again. So I find make your piece slightly thicker if you can get away with it, because very thin clay is a real faff. Right, this first bit is going across the middle like that. Let's have a drink. Now, if you haven't rolled it out and haven't rolled it out long enough and it's not touching, don't worry, you can have a bit of a wiggle and it will. See? Just have a push and it's doing so. Now, you want to push it on from the center and then work your way to the outside edge. What this is doing is stopping you trapping air bubbles. If I sealed the outside edge and then pushed in the middle, you're going to trap an air bubble. If you trap an air bubble, that's just a pocket of instability. It's more likely to break. If the piece is going to break anywhere, it will break on that. So, can you see this bit's a lot wider than the actual armature? That's not a worry. You haven't got to measure. You just bringing it down, use your fingers, just push, and it all folds in. See? Clay is very, very flexible. So on this, you really don't have to measure much. It's fine. So that's a decent coverage for a body. We've now got the ends to do. So again, I'm rolling out some clay, roughly the same thickness that I did before. The good thing is, if you run out of your scrap clay and you need to use another colour, because you are going to cover the whole lot of this, you can make it really patchy. You're not looking for its overall finish, you're looking for its shape and clay coverage. Now, we are not going to bake the dragon in stages, and this is for a really good reason. The scales, it's a lot harder to get them to stick to baked clay. The raw clay helps anchor them, and I have done it where I pre-baked the body, and usually you can get raw clay to stick to baked clay relatively well, but you really got to smudge the top end in, and it's quite a faff. I really have got a decent way of doing this, so we don't need to do that. Right, now what I'm going to do with this end, can you see there's some sticking up the top quite a bit, because we're going to need extra clay at either end to make a neck and towel. So I'm just overlapping that top edge like this. You don't want to double it up too much, so literally 1/2 centimetre. Now this is your risk point, that big gap, doing this without trapping air. So you start at that join point and you're squeezing and bringing it round. Then what I do is I get my finger in there and I push the innermost fold over the top of that bump. Now that still leaves that big air gap there that you've got to be careful about. You're then squeezing that flat and pushing the air up. So now all we've got is the semicircle loop. That I fold this down flat like that. Now it looks like it's had its neck run over. What you then do is you start to push that side in and roll it so that, can you see, it's like a little love heart. Yeah? So there's not a big air gap there. Some of my early dragons, I've had necks and tails break because there is an air pocket at the base of the armature and the tail. So then there's this big wiggle room air pocket and it goes. So take some time to fold it in and get rid of the air. If you find you do have an air pocket and you can feel it, when you push down you can feel that it's something moving around, like you can feel air resistance. It's a trap bubble. Use a needle tool, stab it, push down, just push on the top and the air will start to come out. It will shrink your towel height by the bubble amount, but that's okay. We're going to be able to add to this and put more towel on the dragon. This is just getting that base, and we will be able to smooth all of this out and also get it so that it's not got that big bump there. We'll get rid of that. And how I do that is I just start to push round like this. So I'm using my thumbs along the back and round near the base of the armature. I haven't decided yet which side's going to be neck and which side's going to be towel. I do that at a later point once I've got the clay on both sides. You can then have a look and see which one's got more of a rounded end to it. The more rounded end is the one you want for the towel side. So that needs about that much clay. Let's do that. Roll this out. I sometimes make people jump because I try and roll it out like that, and then the rolling pin slips, hits the glass counter and makes a really loud bang. So be careful that you don't give anyone heart attacks by smashing your rolling pin into your glass counter. It's easily done. So I have found out this week that Your Space Sutton, I have talked about this in previous weeks. It's a community centre gardening sales type place that I go to, and I'm hoping to start teaching lessons at. They're running their latest fair on the 8th and 9th of February, that weekend, and I will be selling there again. I'm hoping to be well enough to do both days. That's what I'm aiming for, because it's a 11 o'clock start. I really wish more fairs were 11 o'clock starts rather than the 9 a.m. so you've got to get up in the middle of the night to get to the place and set up in time. There's no need for it. Nobody needs handcrafted goods that much that they've got to get up that early and skip. Yeah, you know. Who needs breakfast? Who needs a lay-in? Let's go get pottery and handmade chocolates and that sort of, like, why? Just why?
It's great, isn't it?
But yeah, I love the man for it, because my health in the morning is really bad and I can't do several fairs when they want long hours. There was one fair that I was desperate to do, and it turned out that it was 9 a.m. till 10 p.m. you can start packing up, and I was like, I can't do that. That's just impossible for me. This whole early up thing, it all got started when we had a farming community. That's not the case anymore. We don't need to do it. Right, I would say that looks more like the neck and shoulders to me than that end. That looks more towelish. What do you reckon, Jamie and Arty Hearty Life? That way up, so like that, or like that? To me, that looks more, the roundedness looks more shoulder to me.
Yeah, also I think that end is wider at the moment. So
But you can make it thinner, so you bring it up thin, and then you decide you don't want that. All you have to do is push on the top, and it's wide again.
Harry Hedgehog says it looks a bit like a croissant.
Yeah, chocolate croissant. Yep. Right. The only reason why you would want to start to join in these lines is because it makes sure that it's all properly joined together and isn't gonna fall apart. But visually it's not important. So I don't do a perfect job at it. I just make sure that most of it is properly smudged together.
Hottie Life says roundy shoulders look good.
Yeah. So I'm gonna start to try and get that towel at a even thickness all the way along, like this, and up to a point. And that really just requires a bit of twiddling. Now, I want to make sure I leave a bit of a flat base, and that flat base I want to make sure is smoothed over, because we're going to stick a little towel spike. So here, one of them, whoop, twisty tail spike. Once we've got all the scales on, this is my basic dragons. So we need to leave a good nice area that is level to do that with. Now again, just quick smooth in, but can you see I'm not doing all of it? Because one of the things I did when I very first started, I did a lot of steps that it turned out was unnecessary and just wasted my time. And I used to get the underside absolutely looking perfect, perfectly smooth, all no fingerprints, all that, and then I remembered that you're actually gonna cover this in scales. It's not necessary. Just do a rough job. There we go. Right, now the neck, I'm gonna just roll it between my hands just to get, I want to get some of these. Can you see my fingers have left little lumps? Yeah, it's not even. And I know people use many different types of boards for their clay. I really do suggest that a glass one is the best, and I've tried so many. I think my first one that I got using was one of those self-healing green cutting mat ones, and I'm here to tell you, never use that with polymer clay. The clay just melts it, so it gets sticky and goes horrible. So don't bother with that. I think Fimo used to do a perspex board, but again that's very easy to mark with your blade. So yeah, I've heard of sort of bamboo type boards and things like that, and no. The other thing that gets used quite a lot that I do recommend, but it is kind of wasteful, is greaseproof paper. But you can wipe it down and use it a couple of times, but you just got to make sure you thoroughly wipe it. I'm just...
Oh wow, I wouldn't have guessed it would have melted the board.
Polymer clay, it's a PVC plastic with something called plasticizer, which is a chemical that keeps plastic soft. The chemical that keeps it soft in its raw state and able to be moulded, if it comes into contact with the right kind of plastic, it will do the same thing to it. If you want to see it, get yourself an old CD case, because I know that definitely works and melts, and just smudge a bit of polymer clay on it and leave it for 24 hours. When you start to lift the clay off, you'll see it looks like you've stuck it down with Pritt stick, those strings of glue. And when you do clean off the CD case, you will see like a bumpy burnt surface. I've got a picture of it because I did an experiment with it, so I will dig that out for you for next week. Yeah, right, what I've done is pinched along a rough spine. Now again, as you can see, there's some bumps in it. It doesn't matter, it's all getting covered with scowls. It's just a good guideline for me, and it puts that ridge in place, so when I do lay the scowls, it does still have that spine in there, because that is one thing that people notice when you sculpt. If you miss out a spine, it's really obvious. But you've then got the worry the other side, that if you pinch it out too prominently on some animals, it can look like your animal's starved. So we've got a towel, we've got the neck, and that can be bent. However, I think that neck might be a little thin. Yeah, I'm just...
Can you see how the camera's far back?
Nope, you've got the screen.
Sorry.
Sorry, get the neck thickness roughly what you want, but don't forget that the scales are going to be about 3 or 4 millimeters thick, so that will be added width to the whole thing. Now I want to make that neck longer in order for it to crane its neck, in order for me to have an easier job of getting its head under the woman's hand. So if you want to add clay, you've got to make sure there's the surface is completely flat, there's no indent. Or you get your clay and form a bit of a point and put the point in the middle and then smudge it in. But either way, your enemy is air bubbles. You can then start to come round and squeeze it into the rough shape that you want, and then smooth that join, and it should be fine. At that edge, can you see I'm having to push it together, because you don't want to just drag a deeper edge, a deeper crater rather. Now I know I'm misshaping it, that's fine. Once we got the clay firmly attached to each other, then we can bring it back to the shape and thickness that we want. There we go. So I'm just literally going round. There we go. That's firmly attached. But now it's got a very misshapen neck. So I'm going back to my spine. That's why it helped to do it before we added that extra clay. And I'm just coming in and shaping it how I want. So mistakes aren't that hard to rectify with polymer clay. It's the joy of it. I definitely wouldn't work with something like watercolours, which when you make a mistake it's almost impossible to fix those things, because you can't, like with acrylic you can just slap another layer on it and it will hide up a multitude of sins, but watercolour, I don't know how any of them work with it. It's, you've got to be perfect. I'm just getting rid of that crease there because I don't want it to be an air bubble under the scales. I would have a kid crying right outside my window whilst I'm streaming. Sorry folks, it's not even my kid, so I can't even tell it to be quiet or find out what's wrong.
Probably someone going home from school.
Yeah, parents don't like it when you interact with their kids and you don't even know them. There we go. Right, that's looking more like it. See, you would never know that I just stuck a bit on there. Yeah, and that just gives me that bit of extra height that I want for that neck. Right, good looking start, I would say. We are now onto some legs. So I'm probably going to divide this into 4 because 4 is the magic number for legs. Unless we're going for a waven, what are they? Wyvern with
2 legs, 2 wings.
2 legs, 2 wings. Although I don't actually get how they move around. They must literally have to drag their
legs have the wings attached.
Yeah, but if they're not flying,
like a pterodactyl.
They didn't really walk. They were mostly in the air all the time, like or bats. Perched. So yeah, so I take it the wyvern was not a land dweller. It spent its time mythical. In the air with that design. Right, so roughly the same size 4 blocks. I'm going to put that to one side because I'm going to use that for head. Now, I've shown it before, but you really will save on time if you are able to dual wield rolling out. Now, I did have to do some mending on the woman because I think I put her in the oven at slightly too high a temperature because I baked her after dinner got cooked. So the oven was on a higher temperature coming down rather than on a low temperature going up, if that makes sense. And it formed some hairline cracks. That's not a problem. What I did was literally just put some of the skin tone on my thumb and smudge it in, and what you'll find that the cracks will take in clay, but where the surface is baked hard you won't get too much of a build up on the surface, so you're able to fix them up like that. I find that's generally holds well. If you've got a bigger crack though, then you got some work to do, because you're either going to have to start to cut it so that it's a V side, like a V, so it's a trough, because a lot of cracks have very straight edges, so you've got like a very straight edge trough like that. That V gives a bit more surface area for you to fill into and get a firmer hold. Then what I tend to do is keep what I cut out of that V, and I will refill with epoxy then take some of that material that I cut out, especially if it's a pattern, and use that to push in the top, so you've got less design that you've got to try and match up with acrylic paint. Does that make sense? Yes? No?
Yes.
Hopefully. Right, 4 balls. I do find 2-part epoxy is a good one to mend with. And weirdly enough, No More Nails, which is meant to be like a putty that you use for putting shelves up. But I find it actually works really well as a filler, because I find poly filler just falls out. So you've got to try and find a better workaround than that. But ideally, don't let it crack in the first place. Right, so we've got our 4 balls, and they're roughly right for the body size. Remember, they're going to be smaller than the finished legs because we've got the scales to put on.
Like I said, Jake and I have been arguing about how dragons/wyverns work.
Yeah, they couldn't go for long walks. That's what I would say.
Dragons probably could.
Dragons could, because 4 legs is a stable position. It's actually more stable than what humans do, the upright. But wyverns, they're literally dragging themselves, so you've got to worry about going over rocks or stuff, I suppose, whether you're going to get your tummy scales all scratched up. I mean, really, there's a multitude of problems with that sort of leg disparity. Talking of leg issues, do you know that Darwin pranked the entire science world? He turned around and said that blue bottles had 6 legs instead of 4, and everyone went, "It's Darwin, it must be true." And for ages that was what was in all the journals, that's what everyone was quoting. And when someone pointed out, just look at a blue bottle, it does not have that many legs, what's he talking about? And he got interviewed on why did you do this. He was trying to point out that just because you're a celebrity and known as a very good scientist doesn't mean your work shouldn't be checked. You're a scientist, don't get starstruck. Verify everything from everyone. But for ages that was he trolled the world, which I think is hilarious. Right, what I did was I divided the ball in half, and then the bottom half I've taken a smaller ball, so you've got this sort of free bump system going on. Now, what we're going to do, the top bump, that bit there, we need to extend it out and start to push it in on one side, not on the top side. So we're deciding a top and a bottom there, and that's going to be your knee joint. So we're going to pinch out a kneecap on the top side, and there we got the thigh and knee, and now we're going down to a calf, which would be very built up on a muscular animal.
How did I said? I thought all flies had 6 legs.
Was it 6 or 4? We're talking to a numerical dyslexic here, so number issue. Jamie to Google, which way round was it? Right, that bump I pushed along one side to make it flat along the top, because the calf is a bump on the bottom side, not on the top. And I'm pinching along that top side just to give it a pronounced leg bone. So like that. See? Make sure we still got that knee in place. We got a calf. Now for the bottom bump, which is going to be a foot. I am going to persuade it to go forward by pushing at the ankle and pinching and pulling that way, and then I'm going to pinch and push that along the edges just a little bit. We don't want it to be too flat. So we've now got that. I want to just define that heel a little more, like this. There we go. And you can have a fiddle around. You can put a foot arch in. You can bring the toes out. It's totally up to you on where you go with your feet. But that's what we're looking at. Like that. Now, that will go in there, but we're not going to put it in place just yet. See, it'll sit like that, head up. We'll put this in place once we've put the scales on the body and covered the leg in scales. Then we will stick it in.
And that was actually Aristotle.
Was it Aristotle? Have I had a
Flies
complete brain dead?
He said flies had 4 legs.
He said they had 4. Right. Aristotle said there was 4 legs.
Or sometimes 8.
Or sometimes 8. Shows you how good my memory is.
Yeah.
Well, at least I remembered someone scientifically prominent trolled a load of people with fly legs. So halfway there. So right, middle of the ball, starting to pinch round like this. Now, the front legs, I'm not going to do such a big bend in the leg. So we're just repeating this again for the second back leg. We're going to bring that ball, the biggest, if you've got one that's slightly bigger than the other, that's the one you want for the thigh. We're just going to make it a little bit more elongated. Right, next ball down, halfway through that, push and pinch, and we've got the clay allocated for a foot. Like that, there we go. Let's bring that a little bit more. Right, then remember we are going to take out a little bit more underneath but not on top.
The article says it sounds more like an Aristotle thing to do than a Darwin.
Yeah, yeah.
No, it also makes sense. He was a bit of a troll.
They were all a bit of a troll back then because they like to hang out so much at prominent universities and luncheons and clubs. Yeah, there was a lot of science and philosophy clubs going on. I don't really hear much about them now.
Me talking like I knew them.
Well, there's so much written about those guys. It's pretty much like we all know them. But it can get foggy. We can mix them up. I wonder what people in 100 years' time, who they're going to be looking at as prominent from nowadays. Because we don't remember all the celebrities of the day. Only a few. And I'm not entirely sure who will come out. I think David Attenborough, we've got a certainty he's going to be talked about in futures to come. That foot's a little bit more of a rounded top side, so I'm going to make sure that my feet mirror each other. It's so much more easier to make the first one than the second one of anything you're trying to mirror. But I suppose that's obvious. I think David Attenborough will be one that gets remembered. I think Jane Goodall will.
Life says, I imagine Darwin would have been more precious about his scientific reputation. I think that makes sense as well.
It's true. What's the young bloke who's doing a lot of the science talks? Brian Cox. I wonder whether he's going to be someone that gets talked about in the future. because he's really just starting his career, but I think he's got the charisma to be an Attenborough. Right, so we got 2 back legs that are roughly the same. Now for the front, it's going to be roughly on the same vein, but we're going to go for slightly less of a bump on the calf, and they're going to stay a bit more outright and a bit more bow-legged. So I'll show you once I've formed it what I mean. So again, we're dividing in half by squeezing around. I don't know what they're going to do when Attenborough actually gets to either retire or finally isn't with us no more. There's no one coming up in the world that's really
not done his job.
That could replace him, really. It's difficult. He needs to get an apprentice that does all the shows with him so we can get used to the new person. Because he's got to want to retire at some point. I think he's got family. He must want to just have time with the grandkids or whatever. But yeah, can you imagine them letting him? Because I know he's already said he won't go on location anymore. Not unless it's decent accommodation and not too dangerous, that sort of thing. Which is absolutely reasonable. But there's got to come a point where he can't go out and do it no more. I will be sad. I think I will actually cry when that happens. So, similar...
Says, I think there are others available, but no one looks at them while Attenborough is there.
Yeah, that's why I think he needs to be paired with someone, take on an official apprentice. And every program he does, he only does, if he's apprentice, does it alongside him. So then we can start to get used to a person linked with him.
Hedgehog says, I reckon he loves it too much.
Yeah, he does. But he's not going to live forever. So what I'm going to do is we've got the spine like that. I'm not going to push it on firmly. I'm just going to show you what the legs are going to look like in place. So we'll have one in at the base of the tail like that. Another in at the base of the tail like that. Let's put it on screen a bit more.
To get them even.
Yeah, I will work out making sure that the pelvis is directly in line. But I'm just giving you an idea. Now, these arms, so that's the top side like that. They're going to bow out a bit. So we want a bit of an elbow in there. Like this. But instead of doing that, I'm going to be able to position it so it looks more like it's standing like that. And we can have another one in there like this. So they've got more of a forward but then up. Let's see.
Life says, once he stops, others will get their time in the sun and will get to appreciate their talent.
Yeah.
I hope so. That sounds nice.
I hope so, and I hope that it is someone with as soothing a voice. Because there's certain people I just wish they would do lots of audio books. So I'm just doing the last one to put in.
I've woken up your tablet so you can see.
Thank you. And your leg positioning, there's many different ways you can do it. I mean, this one could come under and be like crossed arms. You can rear them up, but if you're going to rear them up so that they're sort of stood up and doing that sort of thing, you need to put wire in the leg because it needs to support the weight. Whilst it's down on its haunches like this, the weight is very at ground level, so it's easier.
Very hedgehog says some people just aren't replaceable.
Yeah. We've who was it we lost from the who did Life of Brian and all that? Monty Python lot. One of them lot died yesterday, didn't they?
Did they?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll look into it.
So when you're making your dragon, you're thinking about Terry Jones, that's it. You're looking at the centre of balance and what bits are going to be carrying weight. And if it's going to have something that's either very thin and brittle, so some of the very, very, if you were going to do some very fine head sort of frills, you will need to think about using wire to structurally stabilize that. But also, if you are rearing your dragon up, you need to not just do a foil body, you're going to need to actually use some decently thick wire and make a basic wire skeleton, and then use tin foil to pad out around that, so that the whole thing can actually stand pretty well.
Artie said, we thought Queen were over when Freddie Mercury died.
Yeah, it's true.
Then they found Adam Lambert and that fella in Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah. Life moves on. Us people living it have to get going and make sure that we don't give up just because someone's not about. It's tough, but we're very adaptable creatures, us humans. It's one of our greatest attributes. What was I saying? Yeah. The clay, when you bake it, it gets a little bit softer before it goes hard. I have watched things collapse in the oven, and it's not great. I gotta tell you, it is very demoralising. You can rebuild sometimes, but you're still left with a lot more work when you thought you had a done project. So do think about what's going to need some wire in it. And
Artie Life says, and Darwin would know all about that in relation to the adaptability.
yes, true. When I got started, I got a mixed bunch of florist wire, and I recommend doing that because certain things are going to need some thicker wire and certain things don't really need that much. When I very, very first started, I got a load of coat hangers, but the wire on a coat hanger is very, very strong, and I find that when I use that, I'm more prone to cutting myself with the ends. So you've got to be careful that you don't get focused on how you're bending it and not notice that you just sliced yourself up with one end. So he's gonna have that sort of thing going on like that with these legs. But it is changeable. I can put one to a side because you don't have to put the balls flat. You can turn them out sideways like that. You can fold so that one's going down on one knee even. Since I might actually do that, do a one knee bow, and then she's stroking his head. That might look good, won't it? Sort of a way of showing deference to his rider. But that can come later once I've got the scales on. Whoop. Don't stick so up. It's lucky it's the underside, isn't it? There we go. Smudge that back into place. So we got the body, the legs. Now, talking of wire, I'm going to use some to put in that neck. And why I'm going to do that is because the head is quite a chunk of clay. It's not a light thing. And where this neck is quite thin, it's very possible that it's going to come unattached. Having the bit of wire just helps give an extra anchor point. So I'm using some of my thicker stuff. I'm going central. You want to give yourself as much room as possible either side so that you don't puncture through. And it's going to be a matter of experience. I can feel where that wire is. And that's the bit that I can't impart to you on how to do that. It's just going to come with time and practice getting these things central. But the more you do it, the more you won't stab the outside. And if you do, just take it out, correct the course and bring it back central again, and then smudge in the hole that you've just done. See? So we've got a neck, so we can put a head on that. So the last bit for this, the basic inside bit before we put scales on, is to make the head. And I'm not going to put a mouth on it or any other details other than putting eyes in its head. Because if you see, all the eyelids and nose and mouth all come when you lay the scales. Yeah? Can you see that in... Oop, let's see. Head. See? Like that. Let's not tip the crystal out onto the table. But I will show that on future weeks. We're going to do the scales and all the detailing. Right. So rough head size. What kind of size do you want? Probably about that much clay will do it. Yeah? And it's up to you if you want actually a little bit more. Dragons, if you're looking at lizards, there can be varying sizes, but most lizards' heads are slightly smaller than you would expect, because usually they've got sort of frills and spines and stuff that bulk out the size. But it always surprises me how small they are, really, once you take off all the neck. I'm going to start with a ball, like always. It's probably best not to stack your legs on top of each other. Raw clay sticks to itself very well. I'm sure that's a symbol for something or other. What are we? What am I thinking of?
What's the symbol for what?
That. I'm sure I've seen that somewhere.
It's not
It's not a swastika. I've seen it with sort of hands and axes or something like that. I'm sure it's in one of my sci-fi books as a design for something.
Are like a grabber, and two of them are...
It's strange what comes to your mind.
Yeah,
Just
odd
off,
symbology.
yeah, odd symbology. Right, so we got our ball. I'm gonna get a muzzle in there just by pinching and twisting, and we're forming into a teardrop now. Isle of Man, that's probably it. I knew it was ringing a bell to me.
That's it. It's like 3 legs.
Yeah,
arranged.
that's it. 3 legs arranged around. I remember legs arranged around like that.
They can't
What would
see
I
that
do
picture.
without you, Hearty Life? You're my
It
perfect
wasn't 4, it was 3.
fact
Yeah.
checker.
And it was legs.
It was 3. Right. I like to go for the more streamlined head with quite a prominent nose ridge. Now, on my early ones, I used to do a flat nose like that and bring the mouth in. Totally able to do. You can also flare the nostrils with a ball tool. I have recently started to change that. I pinch and roll at the tip, bring it into a point like this, and then that comes under like a little beak. Make sure that it's central like that. And to me, I actually like the aesthetics of that a little bit more. We will end up with nostrils, but they will be up on the tip there. So I'm going to put some eyes in. Now, on this dragon, the previous dragon, I used my box of eyeballs. This. And how you make an eyeball. So let's show that up close. Dot of white clay.
Litzel says, hello, late again.
Hello, don't worry. Nice to have you. Dot of white clay. Then you use your ball tool to put a dot of your coloured clay, and then you drop a tiny little ball of black in, and then fill it up with translucent clay and bake it. The cloudiness vanishes when you varnish it, I've found. I like to make my eyes from Sculpey because they bake at a higher temperature than Fimo does. So then I'm not, because doesn't matter for the clay, but I've heard rumours that translucent liquid Sculpey can go cloudy the more times it's hit baking temperature. So, and it's lovely to see you. Also, translucent liquid Fimo doesn't go clear. Sculpey is the clearest one I've found so far. That's not to say it's the clearest one ever available to polymer clay users. I think there is, it might be Kato's one. There's a couple of specialists out there that actually do have some pretty clear ones. But that's how I make my general eyes. This time I thought I will use some cat's eye crystal balls. So got them off eBay, cat's eye glass balls. I've got two sizes. I've got to decide which size eyes. I think these bigger ones are going to be a bit too big. What do you reckon? It's going to take up a lot of the head.
I think it might.
So,
if you bury it deep enough.
Yeah, I could bury it quite deep, but it's still quite big.
Don't forget, you'll be covering the top and possibly the bottom with eyelid.
Yeah.
To try and work the hole.
So the problem is I've got far fewer in this size. I've just put in an order for some more. So I haven't got the blue options. Now the dragon's going to be a dark red. So I might go for the smaller ones. So shall I go for white eyes, green eyes, or that sort of honey colour? So this is your option choices. What do you reckon? Any votes in?
What colour is the scales going to be?
The scales are going to be a dark red. So let's get my dark red out. Let's get some dark red out. No, that's pattern clay. There we go, dark red. That sort of colour is going with it.
Green eyes.
Green eyes? Yeah? Okay. Green we are going with.
That's good to me.
But I shall hopefully by next week have some more of these cat's eye crystals because I really love them. They're really pretty. Right. Keep them separate. Now, if you're using beads, make sure that you've got the holes for the beads facing the sides so they're not going to be seen. The other thing is, have a look which direction the line lays in so that it's going top to bottom. Do you see what I mean? So that's the direction of the line. If we put it in that way, its pupil is going to look horizontal. If we put it in this way, it's going to look vertical, more like a cat eye. Doesn't matter so much which way around you choose. What matters is that you have the same direction on both eyes, or you're going to have a very derpy dragon.
I love that word.
I'm going to put the eyes in towards the front so it's forward facing, because predators tend to have forward facing eyes, whereas prey tend to have their eyes on the side of their head. What that means is prey species have a blind spot in the very centre because they have a better field of vision round the side of their head, which you need for spotting whether you're someone's potential lunch. But since a dragon is most definitely on the predator side, it having a blind spot in the middle would be disastrous for it. It needs the depth perception. And some animals' depth perception is so bad, my guinea pigs will just walk straight off a countertop. They don't care. They have no real idea about it. Hamsters are even worse. So can you see I've made sure that the eyes are pretty level with each other. The direction of the cat's eyes are going in the same sort of line. And I'm happy with where they're positioned. Now it's going to look kind of startled because you've got no eyelids on it yet, but they will come when you put the scales in. So all you really need is to embed the eyes. Now the other thing, can you see they are not level with this skull? They're sticking up a bit. And that's what you want. You want to have a bit of height to them. Because if you actually feel with your hands, if I take my glasses off and you can feel the level of your face, your eyes are not sunken into your eye socket. They stick up a bit. And that's the case on most animals, especially most animals that go hunting. So, these are our components. Dragon body, 4 legs and a head. Now, the wings, that's the next bit. I'm going to need some decently thick wire. Let's grab out some reasonably thick wire.
Fairy Hedgehog says, love the nose.
Thank you.
I think it looks good too.
There are
I missed
so many
reading out Little saying lol.
different...
Hopefully you saw that.
Thank you. There's so many different dragon ways out there. It is worth a Google search. So I've got a medium wire, and the wire that I'm using isn't one that's covered in paper. You can get some wires, and this is useful if you want the clay to not slide around on the wire. You get the paper covered ones. See? Now, the reason why I'm not going to use a paper covered one is what we actually want is the clay to slide around on the wire. What we're going to do is, again, wing length is a personal preference, but you're going to want, for a body that big, you're going to want a few centimetres embedded into the back. So then we're going to take the wire up to the size that we want the wing, so probably about there. Put a bend in it, 90-degree angle, and then we can look at wing length. So like that, probably about there. And you can go Pete's Dragon with it and have the tiny little wings, but I think it's going to be easier for it to fly with proper wing size. So once you're happy with it, cut your wire length. Now the easiest way to make sure that you've got a wire that's the same length, you match up the bottom end by tapping it on your countertop like that, then hold it with one finger under that loop, thumb behind there, and you're holding it secure like that. That keeps that end firm. Then you can fold that wire over at the same length using your fingers of your other hand. Make sure that it's level with each other. Then when you put it down, that'll support that, and you can then rest your wire cutter on the cut wire, and that gives you everything exactly the same height without actually measuring anything. Because if I can get away with that using a ruler, I totally will. Don't throw this bit of wire. You can use it for necks and limb joints and all sorts of things like that. An endy bit of wire is always of use. I put next to nothing in the dustbin. Everything gets reused with my craft. And that's what you want. So the last bit we're going to do today is that wire is that V there, the top V. Yeah? We're just going to cover for that structural bit there some clay, but again it's going to get scowls. Yeah? Now, and this is why we're going to need to have slidey wire for this. You don't want a big ball, just enough to be able to cover where we want to cover. So probably about that. But if you end up with extra, you can always take it off the tip. I'll show you that. Let's do one where it's too big, so I can show you how you can get rid of too much if you got too much. Yeah? So let's move all this lot out the way, because I can see me knocking it or doing something stupid. Now, like I said, you will, with your clay, generally you need to condition it. That's kneading it or rolling it into sausages to mix the plasticizer in with the clay, because it's got a tendency to separate. So I'm rolling them into balls. I can do this without even looking down now. I've done it so many times. Right, and your ball, you want to feed the wire through the center of the ball like that, and get it up into that joint. And whoop, don't bend the wire like that. Try and keep the wire straight. Now you will find, doing a bit of wiggle, you can get that ball onto that corner. It will be a bit loose and torn on one side of the ball at least, and that's fine. Just make sure you don't trap air. You're pushing from the inside and closing it back round. But that's what we want. Ball in the corner like that. Then we find the side that was going to be the bit you stick in, which was that side, and we're going to bring that ball and just twist it, making sure it's central. If it's not central, just push the wire up a little so that the clay stays in the center. Now, and we're just twisting it and bringing it down like this. We want to bring it halfway down, because remember, we're going to actually have some sticking into the dragon. So here we go, like that. That'll do perfect. Now for the bit that's going at the other end. So we spin it around and do the same thing, but we want it thinner than the end that's going in the dragon. And we don't want such a big bump up this end. If we weren't putting scales on or the colour matched, having a big bump there is useful, because what you would do is pinch that up like this into a point, then you twist, and you've got to be gentle that you don't snap it off like that. Keep twisting, then you can do that and have a hook on your wing. We're going to have a hook on our wing, but we don't want it in purple for a red dragon, so I'm going to stick one on, if that makes sense. So for this instance, we don't need the big bump on that joint. I'm bringing the clay all the way down. This is going to actually have excess, so that one's going to have a lot of excess. If it feels like the wire is loose, make a little sort of square out of your fingers so you can push on all sides at once, and just bring that all the way down. You can then round it out, but what you're trying to do is just get rid of that space on the inside. Yeah, so once I've felt that it's firm, but that sliding is so much easier down an uncovered wire. And see, now you can feel where the extra, where the wire ends and all the extra is. And I'm just going to bring that to a thinner point like this. That's even more extra. There we go. Right, that's a good wing outside. See? Now, your wrist points, when you're pulling down, can you see what's happening there? The wire on that bend there is starting to pull through, and you've got to make sure that don't happen. If your wire starts to come out there, stop what you're doing, push at this joint and push it back like that, and you'll find the wire starts to sink in. Then you can bring it up and smooth over where it's broke the surface, and you're good again. Yeah, but you have that risk when you're pulling the clay down the wire. The other time there's a risk of that is when you're actually implanting it into the back. If you don't make guide holes, either with an extra bit of the bit of wire I cut off, that makes a really good guide hole, you can find that as you're pushing the wire in, the clay gets sliced by that joint, and you end up with the wire sticking out through the top. And again, you can sort it out by pushing it back down, take it out, hold the wire, pull on that joint like that, and the clay starts to come back up. Smooth it back over, and this time make some guide holes. Okay, so nothing really is irretrievable. Well, not nothing, most things are retrievable. So second wing outside, and again, scrap clay, clear up after yourself. Right, now the trick is, especially if you haven't got the two sides about the same length like what I have, if one side is shorter than the other, you got to make sure that you don't accidentally put the taper on the wrong end, if that makes sense. I've done it several times where I've had mismatched wings. So let's do this again. We're going to bring the clay around that joint, ignoring that split in the back of the ball, because we're going to be able to use our hands to press that out. and bringing the clay round into an L shape without deforming the wire, like this. Then clay comes down, and if you've got an excess, I'll be able to show you on the side that isn't going all the way to the point. So like this, because this is a lot thicker than that one. You want to make your wings uniform, or you've got to come up with a really good backstory why the dragon has one muscular wing and one thin wing, which I suppose is always a thing. People do put backstories on their clay work. I have seen this. I haven't yet. I haven't got that far. I don't know whether that's going to help me sell my creations, because my sales is not wonderful at the moment. So let me show you all the places where you can take the clay off on a wing if you've got extra. So I've gone too far down for that. So what you can do, get your blade, measure where you want it, so that's about there. Cut down to the wire that side. Line it up so you can see, cut down to the wire that side, and just wiggle it off. So that's taken care of that. You can take off on the joint by just pushing underneath, pulling up like you would to make that wing spike, and instead of making a wing spike you can just literally pinch it off and then tap it down and smooth it out. And obviously, like I showed you before, you can take it off by just overshooting the tip on the tapered end. So don't worry about measuring out your clay so much for wings. You can eyeball it. If that's any help. Because I did have someone use my technique, made a dragon, spent ages measuring out and trying to work out how much clay it takes to cover what size wire, and they asked me about it and my answer was, I have no idea. I just use too much and take off what you don't need. So, and you'll find that with me, when you start talking numbers, my brain doesn't like them at all. I got diagnosed as dyslexic. My spelling is very phonetic, and my numbers work is not great. My memory just won't hold them. And when my birthday changes, where your age changes every year, my mind won't tell me how old I am. So I think I'm 37 because my eldest sister's having her 40th this year, and I'm 2 years younger than her. But if she weren't having a milestone year, I couldn't tell you. But it's easy enough to actually live doing that, I tell you. Right, so 2 wings. They look pretty much the same. Hold them against each other. Make sure you've got roughly the same. Yeah, we're good. Right, clearing up. So I'm going to stop for the day. I'll show you what we got to. We've got a body. We've got the head. We got the 2 wings. The 2 back legs with the pointed knees. 2 front legs with the more rounded legs, so that it's more easy to make it extend, and they're the front ones. And we've got a spine pinched in that body. Okay, so next week what I'll do is I'll show you all how to make the cane for the scales and start to scale cover. Okay, so I hope you all have a great week, and I will see you all next week when we continue making our lovely red dragon. Speak to you all soon. If you want any help or want to share anything with me that you've made, I'd love to see. You're welcome to message me. Okay, bye everyone.